So it's pretty much an open secret at this point that what you're watching in Minnesota is not spontaneous or organic. It's astroturf to say the least, and it's well-funded and well-organized. And the same can be said for basically every incident of domestic unrest for at least the last decade. Remember watching the unrest in the wake of George Floyd's death in 2020? You'd be like flipping through the TV channels or scrolling on social media, and all of a sudden, it's like, where'd that U-Haul full of projectiles and makeshift riot gear come from? Why are there spontaneous pallets of bricks appearing all over the city of Seattle or the city of Portland? Why are there storage containers with ready-made protest signs? And you're seeing the same thing happen right now in Minneapolis and in Minnesota. Where'd they get all this stuff? All in the name of protecting criminal illegal aliens from being removed from our country? That's something that an overwhelming majority of Americans support, by the way. And it was probably the single biggest driver in President Donald Trump's sweeping victory in the 2024 presidential election. And Trump has a beautiful way of not complicating these things, right? Biden destroyed the border, let millions of people in the country without your consent. Elect me, and I will remove them. And the administration has gone about its work delivering the mass deportations that were promised over the past year. There have been hundreds of thousands of interactions between federal immigration authorities and these illegal migrants or American citizens that live in these communities in the course of these operations. And the vast majority of them obviously go without incident. But in Minnesota, it's led to the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. If the left-wing narrative is true, that immigration officials are the modern-day Gestapo rounding people up and are there to purposefully cause unlawful violence, then why haven't people died in Texas and in Florida? In fact, we know the opposite to be true. It's federal law enforcement, immigration officers that find themselves in the crosshairs, sometimes literally. In August of 2025, we had acting ICE Director Todd Lyons on this show, and we asked him what it was like for ICE agents working in the field. And he told us that assaults on ICE officers had increased by 800%. And that was in early August of last year. Now that number is up to over 1,300%. There's been attempted ambush shootings of ICE agents in Alvarado and in Dallas. In Chicago, California, there's been all sorts of crimes against these officers. The list goes on and on and on. You should look it up. Even in those conditions, what happened to Renee Good and Alex Preddy didn't happen. So why is this happening now? And in, of all places, Minnesota. I mean, Minnesotans who have such a reputation for being pleasant and docile that the term Minnesota nice is a real thing. One of my best friends from college is from there. Everyone is so nice. And then it's completely upside down. And the difference in Minnesota is that government officials on the state level and the local level refuse to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement and federal authorities. And they've refused to provide their support to them. While Tim Walz will tell you that Minnesota is not formally a sanctuary state, there's no one-size-fits-all for that, but he's been running around screaming that ICE is Trump's Gestapo and that there's a present-day Anne Frank hiding out somewhere in the Twin Cities writing in her journal. If that's the case, why isn't it a sanctuary state? Sign legislation tomorrow if that's true. Of course, it functionally already is a sanctuary state, which is why the DOJ and a bunch of immigration think tanks in this town, Washington, D.C., identify the state as a sanctuary jurisdiction. The lifeblood of the state, the Twin Cities, actually are sanctuary jurisdictions. They have rules in the books that say, no, we're not cooperating with ICE. So how does this all actually work? Well, for one, the state of Minnesota was not honoring ICE detainers, which is when ICE takes a jailed illegal immigrant from local authorities to deport them. And it doesn't seem like there's much downside to this, right? Saves taxpayer money because we're not going to lock them up in the municipality, gets these people out of the community, and then eventually out of the country. Some reports now suggest that more municipalities are cooperating as the White House works with Walz and Minnesota officials on trying to de-escalate the whole thing, which is good. But it's still a mess. And it was very messy at the time when Renee Good and Alex Preddy died. The DHS has claimed that Minnesota has released over 450 illegal migrants charged with or convicted of crimes back onto the streets since this administration came in. What were these migrants charged of, you might ask? Some sexual offenses against children, domestic violence, vehicular homicide, drug trafficking. These guys are bad hombres. Walz has stood by his claims that the Minnesota Department of Corrections honors all federal and local detainers. Yet his attorney general, Keith Ellison, had a release from his office in February 2025 that claimed law prohibits state and local enforcement agencies from holding someone based on an immigration detainer if the person would otherwise be released from custody. But Ellison has also claimed that sheriff's offices must notify ICE if an illegal with a felony conviction is released. In other cases, according to Ellison's office, it's up to the county. And apparently at the county level, that's where a lot of the problems are happening too. And if this is the case, how is it that more than 450 illegal immigrants charged with or convicted of these heinous crimes, again, drug trafficking, vehicular manslaughter, sexual abuse of minors, how have they been released if it's all hunky-dory, if cooperation actually is happening? So it's a mess. And it's a mess completely of Minnesota officials' making. Fully cooperate with immigration enforcement on detainers, and a lot of the problem goes away. Look at Florida. Look at Texas. Of course, this pushes immigration enforcement into the community, but local law enforcement acting on orders from Minnesota officials, they won't help them in the community either. When immigration officers have a warrant to arrest and deport a criminal illegal alien, local law enforcement, again, acting on their orders from elected officials in Minnesota, won't tell ICE where these people actually are. They won't help secure the ICE operation. And when local law enforcement won't help, the only thing that federal immigration officers can do is go into the community and execute the warrant at great danger to themselves. Tom Homan has said this. Many other people have said this. But just look at the data. A more than 1,300% increase in assaults on ICE officers since this administration came in. You can't run around calling immigration enforcement agents Nazis and then claim you're cooperating with them. It's like a total admission that you're not. And if you are, what are you, the Shupo? This helps explain how some of the conditions were set for these shootings to occur. But there's another darker aspect of this story. Why is it that Renee Good blocked the road with her car and then felt emboldened enough to almost ram an ICE officer with it? Why was Alex Preddy actively looking for confrontations with federal law enforcement days before his death? Why was he a part of a group of trained legal experts, legal observers, or I guess they're calling him, and was directing traffic as people disrupted federal law enforcement authorities? I'm very lucky to work with a man named Tyler O'Neill at the Daily Signal. He's a senior editor for us, and he's done some great reporting that unpacks just how this well-financed left-wing resistance network operates. Tyler has reported on this organization called the Copel Education Fund. Tyler reports that, quote, Copel describes itself as a group that works to improve the quality of life of Latina families. It also hosts a hotline for people to call when spotting immigration and customs enforcement agents at work. The group also sets up the Immigrant Defense Network, which trains legal observers to watch and report ICE, end quote. And while Copel's handbook says, quote, do not obstruct or an arrest under any circumstances, end quote, and instructs people to not resist arrest, Francisco Segovia, Copel's executive director, has likened their activities against ICE to a civil war. A civil war? What is this, the Glorious Revolution? Probably not. You can't have it both ways. In recent years, Copel has raked in quite a bit of money from some organizations you might be familiar with. The New Venture Fund, a nonprofit that has worked with the Open Society linked Arabella Advisors and now works with Sunflower Services, gave Kopel $560,000 for environmental programs between 2019 and 2022. The 1630 Fund, a 501c4 nonprofit aligned with New Venture Fund, sent Kopel's 501c4 nonprofit $185,000 for environmental programs between 2021 and 2023. The Tides Foundation, a left-leaning pass-through foundation, sent Kopel a combined $50,000 for healthy individuals and healthy communities in 2020 and 2022. And it's not just these left-wing nonprofits. It's your tax dollars too. Joe Biden's Department of Labor awarded Kopel a $1 million grant beginning in January 2023 to provide, quote, job placement, workforce training, and post-secondary access, end quote, along with advocacy education of workers' rights to help immigrants and address glaring inequities from the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, that grant ended in June of 2025. After the Department of Labor had given Kopel almost $995,000. How many people were going to be helped by this program? 400. That's it. And while Kopel instructs its trainees to not resist arrest, some other leftist trainings in Minnesota are far more aggressive. Tyler has also reported that Renee Good appears to have been following aggressive tactics promoted by the leftist-funded organization group Defend the 612. MN Ice Watch, an Instagram page, shared screenshots from a de-arrest primer, and it also included a list of community response resources published by Defend the 612. The primer has some pretty insane, seemingly criminal instructions. They suggest that people, quote, follow ICE vehicles while honking and blowing on whistles when they are cited, end quote. They say to create traffic jams and slowdowns. And they want you to try and engage in what they call a de-arrest. The primer claims that, quote, a de-arrest, aka an unarrest, is the act of freeing someone who has been seized by law enforcement officers. A de-arrest can look like physically removing an arrestee from LEO's grips, opening the door of a car, or pursuing LEOs to release an arrestee, end quote. Physically removing an arrestee? How would you do that? Well, it tells you, grab the person being arrested while, quote, pulling and pushing an officer off of an arrestee, end quote. Or just use the physical intimidation of the mob. De-arrest someone by, quote, totally surrounding the officers who have the arrestee or otherwise blocking them and or their vehicle, end quote. Who is funding this stuff? Again, Tyler is your guy. Tyler reports that, quote, Defend the 612 appears to take contributions under another name, Cooperation Cannon River. The website Give Butter allows users to contribute to Defend the 612 in a fundraising campaign organized by Cooperation Cannon River, a 501c nonprofit. The Solutions Project, a left-leaning nonprofit co-founded by actor Mark Ruffalo, gave Cooperation Cannon River $50,000 as part of its Fund for Frontline Power grant initiative in 2023. Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, a left-leaning grant maker that gave $410 million in grants in 2023, gave the group $15,517 that same year for general expenses. Amalgamated Charitable, the foundation of the union-aligned Amalgamated Bank, gave Cooperation Cannon River $10,000 for project support in 2022. The Tides Foundation, that pass-through that has received millions of dollars from Hungarian-American billionaire George Soros' Open Society Foundations, gave $10,000 to the Organization for Sustainable Environment, according to the IRS records. On the ground, the resistance is fairly decentralized, but a lot of the organization and efforts to dox ICE agents, find where they eat, what hotels they sleep in, and then, of course, harass them at those locations, is happening over Signal. Christina Buttons, an investigative reporter with the Manhattan Institute, claims she has identified an account using the name and photo of Renee Good in a Defend the 612 Signal neighborhood chat where she lived. Buttons says, quote, after her death and the media attention that followed, organizers began encouraging nicknames and greater anonymity, end quote. And it wasn't just Renee Good. or, your kind of wacko lefty neighbors in these chats, apparently. It's Minnesota public officials. Minnesota public officials have been caught in these Signal chats as well. The same people who are tasked with keeping the community safe from criminal illegal aliens and have put the policies in place that have turned parts of Minneapolis into a freaking war zone. Yeah, those people. According to the Washington Times, Democrat Minnesota State Representative Alex Falconer publicly acknowledged participating in a Signal chat to combat ICE activity. The Washington Times has also identified Amanda Kohler, a former campaign strategist for Walz, as an administrator of a Signal group known as, quote, MN Ice Watch. That MN Ice Watch, Minnesota Ice Watch, keeps coming up. And then, of course, there's the big one, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, who has denied any involvement in these Signal chats. But independent journalists and other online sleuths claim that she went by the alias of Flan Southside in Signal chats organizing against ICE. Again, Flanagan has denied these claims completely. But at the same time, she's also said that ICE is not capable of saving. And she's put out videos calling for people to put their body on the line to stop ICE.
If you are sick and tired of your government being ransacked by Donald Trump and his minions, literally taking away healthcare from your neighbors, stealing food off of the table from seniors and children, and generally being uncool with the fact that our neighbors are being disappeared, P.S. without due process, it is just called kidnapping, then show up and use your voice, put your body on the line, and use nonviolent direct action, which is one of the most important tools in our toolbox to say, I am not okay. I will not go silently into the night. I will join arms with my friends, with my neighbors, and with people who generally believe that folks should be able to afford their lives, should be treated with dignity and as human beings. Then we need to see you there.
Non-violently, she says, as she uses multiple idioms to describe war and death. And all of this is just the tip of the iceberg. Beth Van Duyne is a congresswoman from Texas. She's brought forth a bill in the House called the Stop Funders Act that looks to shut down this dark money network that is clearly involved in the unrest we're all seeing right now. And of course, that network has been involved in like every major incident of unrest in the United States for the past 15 years. Where did those bricks come from again? Senator Cruz has introduced the companion legislation in the Senate, and the Congresswoman and I will discuss the Stop Funders Act and much more on this episode of the Signal Sitdown. We hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sitdown, but before we get to the interview, we'd love it if you'd hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review because we love your feedback. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works and how to affect real change. Without further ado, here's the interview. Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, welcome to the Signal Sitdown.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, Minnesota, that's what's in the news. And of course, that chaos in Minnesota has followed us to Washington, D.C., where the government was just in a partial shutdown, moving towards not being in a partial shutdown. And we've got 2 weeks to negotiate everything that's going on with ICE right now.
Yeah.
But let's just start with what we've witnessed in Minnesota over the past few weeks. Rampant amount of fraud exposed, violence perpetrated against federal immigration officers, a war of words between Minnesota state officials and President Donald Trump and members of the administration. What's your take on the last few weeks in Minnesota?
Oh, good Lord. Well, just to correct what you were saying about, the next 2 weeks being a conversation about ICE. I think the Democrats want it to be a conversation about ICE, but the fact is we've already funded ICE. Part of the Working Families Tax Cut bill funded ICE through 2029. So right now, the Democrats want to have a big fight over the funding for DHS. Homeland Security, the ICE portion's already been funded. What they're really doing is they're going to prevent funding of FEMA right after we've had this massive winter storms all across the country. TSA, when people are trying to get out of the storms and trying to get back home, and the Coast Guard. So those are like the top three programs that really are going to be affected if we have a shutdown like that. So I think it's a little short-sighted of my Democrat colleagues, but we're going to continue that. Looking at Minnesota, why did this all come up, right? Why are they fighting ICE now? I think they are so anxious to distract from what is actually happening in Minnesota, all the massive fraud that's going on that you're seeing that's been really perpetuated by the entire levels, all levels of governance in Minnesota, starting at the local level. And what they're putting up with as far as these sanctuary cities, what they're putting up with is ridiculous, but they have to do it because you're seeing people voting with their feet. You know, they're moving out of places like Minnesota, they're moving out of places like California, and they're moving to places like Texas and Tennessee and Florida. And as you lose population, you start losing congressional districts. So you're seeing them try to repopulate. And then you're also seeing them basically using federal funds to pay to get on the good side of these illegal immigrants. They happen to be, huge part of the Democrats' power base. And so they are setting up NGOs, which should never have been set up, that are being funded with federal dollars, taxpayer dollars, to go to all sorts of crazy and in many instances fraudulent groups. These non-government organizations that, there's been so little oversight over. And, just taking, for example, what's going on with the Somalian population.
Mm-hmm. The Leering Center.
The Leering Center, yeah. Aren't you glad your kids aren't going there? Good God. You can't make this stuff up. But yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is happening in Minnesota, and I think what the Democrats are just scared shitless out of is that what you are going to see is this is basically the path for the rest of the states. You're going to uncover this exact same kind of fraud in Illinois, in California, in New York, you name it, Wisconsin. And the last thing that they want is these groups being brought in with the Trump administration and basically kind of giving up, okay, this is what it looks like. This is how the fraud is perpetuated. These are the groups that are doing it. This is really where it's coming from. Because that will open up the massive amount of fraud that's happening throughout the country.
Well, and it makes the Democrat machine politics of old look like a properly ordered political arrangement, right? Where it's like, well, at least the American citizens were getting something in return. Now, it just seems like the entire Democratic apparatus, and we saw this over the foreign aid fight too, that the entire Democratic apparatus is oriented towards NGOs that go to propping up foreign groups, certain ethnic enclaves, whether that's in the country of the United States or whether that's abroad. And oftentimes those programs abroad bring people here into the United States. But let's kind of break this all up step by step. So we uncover this fraud, and ICE decides, immigration enforcement decides, we need to go in and do something about this. And Tim Walz has said that there is present-day Anne Frank somewhere writing in her diaries about everything that's happening in Minnesota. He has called immigration officers essentially Nazis. Yeah. He's called them Trump's Gestapo. At the same time, he's run around claiming that, well, Minnesota actually isn't a sanctuary jurisdiction, and we are cooperating to the extent that we feel we are compelled by the law with federal immigration authorities. Now, the administration has said, no, you're not. And Republicans on Capitol Hill have said, nope, you're not cooperating to that extent. How is Minnesota in actuality a sanctuary state? Of course, Minneapolis and St. Paul are explicitly sanctuary cities. Yeah. And what are they doing to not cooperate with law enforcement there? So
being a sanctuary city is basically, and by the way, there's no agreed upon definition. So in many cases, you see these cities, you see states like California that create their own definition of sanctuary city and even pass it. And in the general idea is that they are going to refuse to have their local law enforcement, or in the case where it's a city, their local or their state law enforcement work in cooperation with Immigration and Customs Enforcement to enforce federal laws on immigration. Now, it's a partnership. And if you look at the state of Texas, right, we actually have an anti-sanctuary city policy in Texas. And that's the rule. That's the law. Yeah. That's the law in Texas. So you're not allowed to be a sanctuary city in Texas. It's a 287G state. And as a result, you've had 1 out of 4 of all of the 2.7, 2.8 deportations that have happened have been out of the state of Texas. What have you not seen in the state of Texas? Protests, violence, people getting shot You're not seeing that, that level of violence, that level of organized hate against immigrations and customs enforcement, because it is regulated in such that it's a very efficient system. So when I was the mayor of Irving, and by the way, I've been talking about this, I've been fighting this since, it's embarrassing to say how long it is, but 2006, it's been 20 years.
Yeah.
I was fighting to get 2A7G status in Irving before we actually had a state law on it. But basically what it means is that your local law enforcement will partner at the state and the federal level, so that if you are stopping somebody who has committed a crime or is suspect of committing a crime, and you stop them and they're not able to show that they're in your country legally, they're detained, and then you call ICE. ICE comes, they do the interview, and if they're found to be here illegally, they're deported. I mean, it is all very orderly. So if Minnesota was really concerned about not having the optics of the violence and ICE raids, work with ICE. This is not rocket science. It is so simple. It is so much cheaper. It is so much safer. And where they're targeting is the criminal element, because you're working with police who are stopping folks who are doing this. And the amazing thing was, I remember when we had the most deportations per capita of any city in the country, in Irving, Texas. And we had like the New York Times, you had the LA Times, all calling us names, haters, bigots, you racist, you name it. But what we found was our crime rate plummeted. We became the 5th safest city in the country, because when you enforce your laws, people actually feel safer, people are safer. But the funny thing is, everybody who's calling us a racist or anti-immigrant fails to recognize the fact that a lot of the criminal, illegal immigrants who are here are preying upon other folks in the immigrant community. So when you actually make a safer community, you're making it safe for everybody.
Yeah.
And so
it penalizes people at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. Right. A lot of immigrants are in that camp, and you're actively punishing, whether that's in the economy or whether that's in access to social services, people who did it the right way.
Right.
And it's just completely and totally upside down.
And why are they doing it? Again, because they are so desperate to keep those people, maintain the population for their congressional districts, maintain their ability to be able to get federal funds and be able to distribute it how they want. Mm-hmm. And it's all about power. It's all about money. It's got nothing to do with the safety of their community, the betterment of their community, economic growth. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with, we were a nation built on immigration. You don't care about the nation that was built, because if you did, you'd actually study your history and recognize the fact that when people came here, they assimilated. They wanted to be part of the system. They wanted to be able to succeed here. They wanted to be able to open up small businesses. What we see is folks that they're letting in basically become completely dependent on the government system, and then they get to have more flow through of dollars from federal agencies. Is absolutely ridiculous. But when we talk about these protests that they're having, one of the reasons why I've introduced my Stop Funders Act is you are seeing these massive protests against folks like immigrations and customs enforcement. These are obviously organized. And I've read some of the MS Now articles, and like, how do you know they're organized? Gee, let me see, because everybody that comes is wearing the same gear. They all had the same professionally made signs. They're all coming at this particular time. Many of them have been arrested in other places for having protests. And now they're showing back up at the same, at different places across the state, across the country. These are organized. So my bill actually wants to go after the funders of these illegal protests, these violent protests, by tracking the money.
Okay, so I want to jump back real quick, because you said 1 out of every 4 deportations out of the state of Texas. Now, luckily, I think Texas is getting enough refugees from California to make sure that you guys aren't going to see your electoral representation diminish.
No, we're actually seeing it increase.
You're going to see it increase in a big way, and whether that's in 2030 or before. I mean, why not do a census before if we've successfully deported millions of people and no one wants to ask the citizenship question? Interesting. But you look at Texas, hundreds of thousands of interactions between the community and immigration enforcement and migrants. And the only instances of violence that we have, no Renee Good case, no Alex Preddy case. It's assaults on ICE officers from intense left-wing agitators, which I think is an element of what you're trying to get at in your bill here. Where like, this is all a little too perfect and a little too organized. And according to DHS, according to ICE, we've seen assaults on ICE officers increase more than 1,300% since this administration came in. I mean, you are from a district in Texas. There have been some major violence committed against ICE there. What have you heard from people on the ground? Why are people graffitiing Antifa slogans and then going after ICE agents there in the most terrible way possible?
Well, again, and I want to extend a great amount of gratitude to the folks that were at those ICE detention facilities in North Texas. If you remember right, when shots did start, coming out, it was the ICE agents that got in front of the folks, the illegal immigrants who they were protecting. And put their own life on the line to be able to protect them. I think that needs to be said. It's not said enough that these folks are doing a job. They have signed an oath. They have trained, to be able to do their job, which is to protect communities, be able to enforce the laws. People are complaining, but come complain to Congress members. I'm going to repeat that. Tom Homan had said that in a press conference last week, and I wrote Tom, and I'm like, thanks a lot. But I said, but you're absolutely right. If you're going to complain about the law. Don't complain about the people who are hired to actually enforce the law. It's not their fault. It's the elected officials. But I will take credit, blame, whatever it is, for saying that we want to protect our borders, that we want to protect our communities. In North Texas, when I was mayor, it was a very contentious mayor race when I ran. Some of it did have to do with illegal immigration, something that we've been fighting in Texas, right, a border state, for decades now. But even the folks who didn't support me when I ran for mayor, when we started supporting Immigration and Customs Enforcement and they started seeing the benefits of those programs, they really appreciated it. And our police were fantastic because they actually did community policing. They went out in the cities. They went out to the churches. They were at the schools. They were at the fairs. People saw them. They have relationships. These are people that live in the communities. Mm-hmm. And to have that trust and that respect at the local level, and then to extend it to the federal level because you are helping them doing it in a controlled manner, is what we need to do, as opposed to having like our local law enforcement be the enemy of our federal law enforcement. That doesn't help anybody. And so what I'm hearing in North Texas is you've got a couple of folks, whether or not they were the same, people that we have seen from, Austin. One guy was arrested in Austin for, aggressively attacking with a weapon a police officer. Then the Soros-funded DA let them go in Austin.
In Austin.
And then they were arrested in Dallas at the facility, at the ICE facility for attacking it. This is obviously organized and we've got to go after it. But I think in polls will support this, that the vast majority of Americans want to make sure that we are enforcing immigration laws, that we want to see the deportation of criminal illegal aliens. They are for that. They are absolutely supportive of that. And so if all of these states, all of these cities that have sanctuary city policies would actually be responsive to their constituents, they would learn that if you work with federal law enforcement, they know this. They know this is not a Anne Frank moment. But they are there to do their job, which is to protect Americans. They would get the support of their citizens. Instead, what they're looking for are these like shiny objects. Look over here, look at this, what looks at the optics level, from the viewpoint. This is the angle that we're going to show. This is how this looks bad.
Well, we're going to airbrush photos.
Yeah. Oh, without a head, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah, the AI
the Senate
stuff.
Floor. Yeah.
And then they had...
It's not true. We're going to make it up.
Yeah. And then they took the photo of Alex Preddy and they airbrushed him and face-tuned him and made him look not like himself, as if, we really have to make this person look better in order to achieve the public sympathy that we want. And it's so despicable and so disgusting. And, I think a lot of folks around here who work in the conservative movement, a lot of folks who are part of Trump's base says, yeah, it's terrible that Alex Preddy died. He shouldn't have been doing what he did. And we should really be going after the people who radicalized him and funded these types of behaviors and told them that it was okay to do this. And also acknowledge that it's predominantly the fault of Minnesota policymakers who refused to protect ICE agents and their communities from these types of altercations. And so let's get into it. I mean, you mentioned your Stop Funders Act. I remember watching in 2020 where it was like all of a sudden there were just spontaneous pallets of bricks showing up in Portland and Seattle as if like the entire city was just halfway done with construction. And it was just all of a sudden there was a U-Haul truck.
It's almost like it was a video game.
Right. And then all of a sudden there was U-Haul trucks full of riot gear and warehouses full of protest signs. And then you'd have fact checkers saying, oh, well, all of these claims online are unsubstantiated. Well, what are you talking about? A pallet of bricks is like airlifted in the middle of a riot, and you're expecting me to believe that
And signs are all coming out of trucks that have been professionally produced.
What are we talking about here?
You're all wearing the same riot gear.
Yeah, everybody knows that it's been funded, and I think a lot of folks in conservative media have worked really hard to expose the way that this left-wing money network works, including some of my colleagues like Tyler O'Neill. You say, let's not go after just the guy who's outside of the federal courthouse in Portland or now outside of the ICE detention facility, whether that's in New Jersey or Texas or Minnesota or wherever it may be. We need to cut the head off the snake. We need to go after the money. And the president has said this. The vice president has said this. Tell us about this Stop Funders Act and what it's going to do in particular.
So it's basically saying that, where you have these violent protests, that you're going to follow the money. So you're going to expand RICO standards to protests, to violent protests. So this is how, you got behind organized crime, because this is organized crime. And so it's saying that we're going to follow.
Scariest type of organized crime, actually.
Where they're going after federal law enforcement. But that's basically what it's saying, is that we're going to expand the RICO Act to allow the investigation into protests and who's organizing them, who's paying for them. And I think when you're seeing people getting shot, when you're seeing, the massive amounts of just even like property damage that's happening, find out who's funding it. Mm-hmm. When you're seeing the same people that are popping up over and over and over again at these organized protests, who's funding it? Follow the money. And is it a number of different organizations? Is it outside entities? Are we seeing money that's coming in from foreign countries, to fund this? It's not beyond the realm of possibility. And so unless you start following those dollars, you're going to continue to see this happening. And they don't really care. I mean, they are fine to stick out, the Miss Goods of the world and encourage them and train them and to get them out there, as long as it doesn't, bleed back to them. But I think this is why, again, this shiny object that Democrats are asking you to look at. Don't look at the investigations. Don't look at the fraud that we are uncovering. Don't look at the fact that, these NGOs that are supporting illegal immigration, encouraging illegal immigration, paying for it using your taxpayer dollars, is doing things like increasing the cost of healthcare, increasing the cost of housing, increasing crime in communities. Don't look at that. Just look at this poor, helpless, example of how bad ICE is. And I am, part of the funding for DHS, the additional funding is to provide body cams for these ICE agents. I know that when I was mayor, we got body cams for our police officers, and it's amazing when you can see this is from their perspective. This is a reasonable response. All of a sudden, it's really hard to try to make up what happened or come out with your AI simulations of what happened.
Right.
But I think, I did our police academy, our citizens police academy when I first got elected. And I went through, it was an 11-week course. And one of the full days was like it was almost like a video game. Here you are the police officer, and there's a full screen. And it was an example of what would you do. So you see all sorts of scenarios. Do you pull your gun out? Do you shoot? Do you try to, respond with voice commands? And it was fascinating. What you learn when you're educated about law enforcement. For example, over 90% of guns that are taken from a police officer, by an assailant are used on that police officer, or attempted to be used on that police officer. If you know that, you're trained to know that. If somebody, grabs for your gun, you are going to do what you have to do to be able to protect yourself.
It's the number one most important fact in the Michael Brown case, of course.
Yes.
This is.
But I mean, we saw journalists go through this that were like 100%. Very, very critical of the response from police officers. Why did they just shoot him in the leg? Why did they pull their gun? Why didn't they just tell them to stop? And after they went through this course, they were like, "Holy cow! that is how they would respond. And I think allowing more people like opportunity to do that, I would love to see that in our high schools. I think every single high school student should have to go through that program and recognize, oh, it's so easy to play Monday morning quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, this is what I would have done. Are you sure that's what you would have done? And I think having the cameras on, which is, they're going to stop the funding, right? If they don't support the DHS funding, that was appropriated, they're going to stop that. But I think it's really important to be able to show people firsthand, this is what they're going through.
Yeah, and it completely changes your perspective when you talk to responsible gun owners about all this stuff, where it's like, if I'm carrying in public, I am the nicest, most relaxed, calm person I could possibly be. I get pulled over. I need to have a conversation with the police officer about what's going on. Yeah. And sadly, we grow up in a culture now where gun ownership is frowned upon. More so than it's ever been. I
live in Texas.
You live in Texas.
It's not frowned upon.
It's not frowned upon where you are. I'm from California. It's probably worse than being a Nazi in California if you're a gun owner, if you can even get one. But it's like, there's so many people who Monday morning quarterback this, and they've never actually talked to anybody in law enforcement, or they've never taken a gun safety course, and it completely changes things, right? I had a friend who was chief of police in a suburb of Los Angeles, high illegal immigrant population, very high gang population. This is not a good part of town.
Yeah.
And he says, once you cross that line and you shoot somebody, that is like, you and the officers around you are meant to shoot that person until they are down, and then you can go in. And that's why you see the media run with stories. Oh, they shot him 17 times or something like that. Well, there was 8 million things that could have been different, or that person could have done differently to avoid a lethal confrontation with police officers when they happen, and they happen very, very rarely.
Well, and by the way, the police officers that does happen to, there's no joy in this.
No.
I mean, if you talk to these police officers if you talk to these ICE agents afterward, I mean, it's horrible for them. It's not like they're cowboys who are going in playing a video game. I mean, this is real life to them too. And I don't think people give them enough credit for being human beings, having conscience. I mean, they're doing a job, and their job is to enforce the laws. This is what they're getting paid for. This is the oath that they took. And they're taking it seriously because they want to help people. They don't want to hurt people. They want to help people. And, I look at these elected officials. Every single elected official has taken an oath that they will enforce the laws in their state and in the Constitution. And so everyone that is saying, "Oh, we're not going to work with federal law enforcement. We're not going to help do this," they're breaking the law. One, but two, they're also going against the oath that they took. Nobody forced you to run for elected office. In everyone, before you got on there, you all swore an oath, which you are actively working against. Mm-hmm. And if you can't do that, I think we do. I would love to see, for every elected official who is not upholding their oath, they need to be kicked out. No, that's up to their voters, and that's up to recall elections and all that. But it is awful that people would do that. It's political theater. They know why they're doing it. It's for power. It's to keep those checks from the federal government coming, but it's destroying our country from within.
You mentioned the body cams, and this is one of those instances where the Democrats come up with this genius play, and I don't think it's going to work the way that they think it is going to work for them, because oftentimes body cams are massively helpful to exonerate law enforcement agents. But they've also made a bunch of other demands. They've demanded that we're not going to have masks on ICE agents anymore, even though they're being doxxed.
Were they not the party of masks just a few years ago, right? Look about Minnesota. They set up like a hotline to be able to like rat on your neighbor if he wasn't wearing a mask, if he wasn't staying 6 feet away. And now all of a sudden they're anti-mask?
Right. It really makes you think. They want to conceal the identities of certain individuals and expose the identities of others. And when that is your standard, when that double standard is so blatantly obvious, you just think to yourself, oh, maybe they actually want these people to be doxxed and targeted. And they want to make being an ICE officer so politically toxic that no one ever wants to do it again. And it kind of reminds me of in the 2020, 2021 era when they tried to make representing Trump in a court of law so toxic
I remember that.
Right? Oh, if you're a lawyer for the president, for the former president, then you're going to probably lose your your law license. Like, you're just going to get disbarred. And how many people actually want to go out there and put that on the line?
If you spoke against the COVID vaccine as a doctor, they were going to take your medical license.
Exactly.
If you posted about it, they would kick you off, social media.
And you have to have fortitude that not many people have to go forward with stuff like that. But this Stop Funders Act, when we're expanding RICO, we want to go after these organized riots, these organized violent demonstrations. I mean, I called it probably the most dangerous form of organized crime, because this is the type of civil war-like organized crime. And so when you talk to people about this bill on the Hill, when you talk to folks in the executive agencies, when you talk to people at DOJ or you talk to folks at DHS, what do they make of this bill? Have they been wanting to do this for some time but haven't had the authority to do it? Have people been scared in the past to do it? I mean, why hasn't this been done before?
Well, you got to admit, this is somewhat new.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, during the Biden administration, you were not going to see it happen.
That's true. There was no appetite there.
Yeah, I mean, but the type of organized action against our own government, that's fairly new. And when you've got as expensive as these attacks have been, and as effective, I mean, look at how many of these images now you see across the country. You're seeing them all out of Minnesota right now. I think, quite honestly, it's because you got Democrats who are like, let's just use this as an example. It's almost like them whenever they have a school shooting, you see Democrats salivate because they want to talk about gun control. It's pathetic. It's sad. It's scary that they do this, but they're looking. They are encouraging. Oh, have an innocent person get hurt by ICE so that we can then put their picture everywhere. They want that to happen. They are pushing that to happen, and that's where we really need.
Peggy Flanagan, the lieutenant governor of Minnesota, said, "Non-violently put your body on the line. We're not going to go silently into the night." So it's like non-violently, but here's every single euphemism I can think of about war and death surrounding that.
We need to temper down. We need to temper down. But you're a Nazi.
Yeah, it's what is going on?
Anne Frank moment, right? Yeah, no. What's going on? You're seeing the left go crazier and crazier, so extreme. And quite honestly, I think it's because they recognize with all of these investigations, and we just had Kelly Loeffler today come and speak to our GOP conference, and she's talking about how they're even using AI now to start uncovering a lot of this. I think you're going to see the fraud and the abuse being uncovered quicker, and they are running scared. This has been their lifeblood. This has been their bread and butter now for decades. And they recognize, this is getting uncovered. The American folks are going to be able to see where these dollars are going, and we're going to have no place to hide. And the last thing that they want is that to happen. So they're creating all these other massive distractions, pulling at heartstrings, making up lies, to be able to distract from what is actually going on. And it's not just the uncovering of fraud and abuse, but it's the good things that this administration is doing. The Working Families Tax Cut bill, where you're going to see $150 billion of tax rebates go out in the first quarter. They don't want to talk about the $1,200 they're going to be going in American families' pockets on average. They don't want to talk about the no tax on tips, the no tax on overtime, the increased standard deduction, the increase in the child, in child deductions. They don't want to talk about the increase in the senior deductions. This administration, this Republican-led Congress and Republican-led Senate are passing bills that are actually helping people. We've seen decreases now in crime. We've seen decreases in the number of deaths from fentanyl, decreases in mortgage rates, decreases in rental rates. We have seen wages increase, beyond faster than inflation, which we haven't seen during the entire Biden administration. Those are the things that are happening. You're seeing increase in economic growth in our country by over 5% the last quarter. And again, Secretary Loeffler was saying that we're going to see that again. That's what they're hoping to do is 5% this year. That is massive. Mm-hmm. You're looking at energy prices that are some of the lowest that we have had in a long time. That benefits everybody. You're seeing trade deals that are coming up. You're seeing peace deals that are being made. It is hard to keep up with the rapid movement, the progress that this administration is making.
Well, and what you just described from the Democratic perspective, from the liberal perspective, is cornered animal. Cornered animal can be very dangerous desperate. And I I interrupted you before, and you said this is a somewhat new phenomenon that we're seeing.
Yeah.
That this type of violence is organized with the loose coordination of a money network and some public officials, ? That still needs to be fully investigated, in my opinion. Against administration.
Well, they're either involved or they're useful idiots.
Yeah,
exactly. Willing to turn that eye because they're getting something out of it. Now, I'm not saying they're necessarily getting paid off, but power.
But the
power votes.
When I interrupted you, you were going to tell us a little bit about how DHS, DOJ, folks on Capitol Hill are receiving this Stop Funders Act. So are they excited to be able to do this?
The administration is supportive. The administration is definitely supportive of it. I will tell you, though, I'm trying to get bipartisan support. So if you know anybody out there who is a elected official, call them, call your Congress member, call your senator. Let's make sure that they are on this bill because it's going to be really important. And quite honestly, everybody should want that. Do you really want to have organized violent protests in your backyard? No, you don't. Are you going to send your kids? Are you going to send your sister, your wife, your husband to these organized protests when you know that it's typically somebody that's not even associated with your community? All they're looking for is that viral moment that they can send out in a clip. And they're willing to destroy communities. They're willing to destroy lives and families to get it.
Yeah, the love is love, science is real, we love Dr. Anthony Fauci sign probably won't save you when the mob comes to town, even if you put it in your front yard. Before we let you go, you got 2 weeks to really negotiate what's going to happen. As you said, ICE funded. Where is this going to go, though? What are the conversations going to look like in the next 2 weeks? Are we going to have a shutdown over those next 2 weeks?
I think the Democrats led by Schumer are absolutely freaking out right now. And Schumer, let's face it, look at what's overtaken New York, right? You got a Marxist as mayor. You're having all of these protests in your city. He has to prove that he's fighting. I'm fighting the good fight. And so he's willing to shut down the government to prove it. At the end of the day, they don't want the benefits that you're seeing that are coming up from the actual policies, the bills that we've been able to sign into law, that we've been able to work on. These tax cuts that are happening, these incentives for more jobs to come over from overseas, more manufacturing, more job opportunities, higher wages. They don't want that because all of that would mean that they're going to lose the midterms. So they are willing to tank the economy. They are willing to increase crime, all as a result of being able to tank the midterms. So are we going to have a government shutdown? Look, if it means stopping funding for immigration and customs enforcement, I don't think you're going to see any Republican vote for that. I certainly won't. And if that's what's going to shut down the government, that's the decision, the compromise that leadership comes up with. I don't see it happening. So we're going to continue to fund immigrations and customs enforcement. I love the fact that people are saying, oh, well, the Trump administration is backing down in Minnesota because they sent in Tom Homan. Do you know Tom Homan? I mean, they're not backing down, man. They're doubling down. And they are going to, they're sending in their best of the best who are like, we're going to tackle this. Mm-hmm. He's professional. He's respected. He's experienced. They're going to tackle this. But so I don't see funding for that stopping. I know that that's what the Democrats are going to try to do. I don't think they're going to be successful. And then, are they really willing to back down and shut down the government because they don't want to have our borders secure and they don't want to have criminal illegal aliens, which is very much supported by their constituents? Are they willing to shut down the government for that? We'll see. I think a lot of them are playing political theater right now. They want to say that they're fighters because they feel like this extreme base that they now feel beholden to is going to force them to do that. But they're not doing their job, and they're not really upholding to the oath they made when they took office.
Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, thank you so much for coming on this.
Great to see you. Great to see you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sitdown. Before you go, be sure to hit like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review. We not only love your feedback, but it really does help the show. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works. See you next time.